We have a great panel for you tonight. I've lived in Colorado almost 30 years, so the last decade or so has been just a beautiful, beautiful thing for me, watching the cannabis industry grow right in front of my eyes, literally. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Celia Daly, who is, what's your official title at Canopy?
I'm the marketing manager at CanopyBoulder.
It's a cannabis-centric accelerator for startups and entrepreneurs trying to work within the cannabis space, and I'm sure she'll tell you much more about it. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us. Like he mentioned, I'm the marketing manager at CanopyBoulder. CanopyBoulder is a venture fund and business accelerator for cannabis, ancillary cannabis startup companies, and now in 2019, hemp and CBD products as well, which we're really excited about. So we work with tech, software, media, marketing, data companies that are all kind of supporting the industry. And actually, everybody on our panel tonight are CanopyBoulder alumni, so they can, I'm sure at some point, maybe later tonight, talk about that experience if you're interested. Yeah, so I've done marketing for a couple years in the space, and it's changed a lot, and so it's always sort of exciting to get together and do things like this, because I think even in the space of like 3 to 6 months, things can be totally different. So it's good to kind of stay up to date. So I'm excited to kind of hear what they have to say as well. But I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and tell us why you're here and why you know anything about this topic.
Sure. My name's Dustin Lato. I went through Canopy probably a year and a half ago, with a software company that I brought from the mainstream. So we'd been operating for about 5 years and then saw an opportunity in the space to bring our ad tech software into the space. On the side of doing that, I also freelanced in the space, so startup companies and other larger companies in the cannabis industry, doing everything from graphic design to web development to photography, video, whatever they needed. And recently, and then part of my involvement with Canopy prior to my software company, we had a vaporizer company that I was partner, I guess you could say, in that as well. And then I've recently just partnered with a CBD company, and not through Canopy, but in that other space. So I have a lot of hats that I wear at this point.
I'm Ryan Sterling. I am CEO, co-founder of GreenScreens. We're an in-store display company for dispensaries. We do menu boards as well as daily promotions and advertising. And so we really focus on the retail experience for customers and in that digital marketing sense. My background's actually in hospitality, and I lived in Aspen for about 6-7 years as a bartender up there. It was outstanding, and that's some of the reason that I was intrigued by this was because there was this Aspen little bubble, and this cannabis industry was just making such a name that I was very much enthusiastic. The hospitality industry with cannabis is very important because of the product on the shelf, the consumer coming to the store and leaving, and there's a lot of aspects to that are very synergistic. And so going through Canopy August 2017 with 2 other co-founders, we're now in 130 or so dispensaries, 9 states, and so it's been a really awesome year and a half or so. I see a lot of content. I see a lot of great content, and I see a lot of not so great content. And so, why I'm really excited to be here tonight is because most of my day recently is talking about content. And although I have trouble drawing a stick figure, I am very aware of the importance of that. And for cannabis being a regulated, fragmented environment, it is really, really critical. So very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. My name is Paul Good. I'm founder and CEO of Demeter. What we do is create consistent visual content for brands. So that's anything from lifestyle photos with models in different areas to like professional videos. And we really leverage creators around the country. If you need a photo in the Grand Canyon or you need a photo in New York City, that's something we can help with. Thank you.
Cool. So these guys, I think, represent a really good cross-section of kind of the different areas in the space. So I have some questions prepared, but I don't need to just talk it. We don't need to just talk at you all night. So as things come up or as you guys have questions, like please just jump in, raise your hand, or talk. It's fine. We would like to know what you have to say and give you the information you want to know. So I think easy question, right? And maybe where we begin with all this is, how does cannabis differ from other industries, right? And what are the things we have to think about that we're not thinking about maybe in other industries?
So, coming from obviously the mainstream, I was in an ad agency for about 7 years, dealing with media buying and media reconciliation. So shifting from that to the cannabis space, partially it was super easy because the market it's still infantile, so you have a little more free reign, but at the same time there's a lot of legality of how you advertise and where you can advertise, and you can't literally advertise just about at all anywhere. So you have to get creative, and that's kind of where the in-store signage came into play, where we were like, okay, well, we can at least advertise inside of a shop because it's private and they own it, and it's not pushing it out to the public. That's one of 1,000 differences that I'm seeing in this industry compared to the mainstream. But overall, kind of the difference in working with people in this industry versus mainstream is that they're all very new. So, and a lot of these companies, you have some that have transitioned from mainstream into the cannabis space, and so they bring some of that expertise from that industry into the cannabis. But then you have a lot of companies that are starting that have zero experience because it's wide open right now. So you get a lot of people that they're not people, but companies, that they're not necessarily aware of what they need or how to do it or what to ask or how to build a brand or how to anything. So as a freelance, there's a lot of challenges with just helping to guide, and you kind of have to get engulfed into their company and be really hands-on, more so than you would in the mainstream. You don't have to learn as much. I mean, you still have to learn stuff from the company, but in the cannabis space, you almost have to become part of the company to really understand what it is they're trying to do to be able to then produce something that they can use.
No. So all this complication actually makes my job a little easier because I work with influencer marketers, and that's one of the few areas you can actually do in cannabis. Can't exactly do Facebook advertising, Instagram advertising, so we have limited options. So there has been a big focus on influencer marketing and having to sift through, are these people being real or not? So it has created a challenge for the end user as well. And a fun little fact I learned, Dustin, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't advertise CBD on Facebook advertising, but you can CBD dog treats. So they actually have different regulation. CBD, like a dog treat. A dog treat for animals.
Dog treats.
Yes. So it's a fun little random fact that I learned that I think applies to the...
It's not for humans?
Yeah, exactly. We can feed our dogs whatever drugs we want, but not ourselves. They just have less restrictions for humans. But I thought it was a fun little one to leave you guys with.
I would say that for me, the business deals themselves, the contracts involved, some of that is very, very different. There's a lot of just time spent with the mainstream, years, decades, right, of things that are just accepted because they're the norm, and they're not necessarily the best, and we just do them because that's what we know. And what I'm finding is that this is a really fun space to disrupt some things a little bit. So if you don't like how an advertiser relationship is with a publisher or whatever, let's fix it. And that's the best part that we can do. All three of us have all actually worked together as well, and we see that in that there's very much a give first ethos in cannabis, and people that are willing to flex and move based on how fast the market changes, and we touched on that earlier, but 3 to 6 months is even way too long, right? This is really, you're talking about month to month to month in this industry, and there's enormous changes every single month there. So, kind of break free of those, older mentalities. If you have decades of experience with, well, this is how the advertiser relationship works, these are the average commissions, it might not be the same. So keep that in mind, that's what I'd say.
So something that Dustin just mentioned, which is really interesting, is the fact that this industry is a startup industry, and so pretty much everything in it is a startup, and that creates sort of a whole nother layer of things, right? Because you have people that are doing something brand new who have maybe never done any kind of marketing in the past, or any kind of anything related to what they're doing. And so I guess I'm curious, like, what does that mean for you? I mean, and Dustin, I think you talked a little bit about having to guide strategy a little bit, but is there anything else that kind of comes with working with startups? I mean, I know that personally, I know there's a lot, but
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the biggest challenge has been just guiding, but in terms of challenges, let's say from a freelance standpoint, again, money is a big issue. Not a lot of companies, I mean, they are startups, so they're strapped. And I went from making X over here in the mainstream that when I came into the space, I've taken, in some case, it's almost a case-to-case basis. I can't walk in and say, here's my hourly to everybody, right? I have to adjust because the market doesn't allow for me to just come in and dictate, like, here it is, because I would never get any work. Because these companies, not all of them have the funds to be able to just splurge on marketing and advertising and branding. They're worried about keeping the lights on, paying bills, making product, whatever it is. So I've had to shift some of that mentality, and sometimes I do free work just to get in the door for the hope that they become a bigger company, and then I get more out of it. There's things you can do in terms of like equity. There's all kinds of ways around physical cash, because that is a problem. And also sometimes getting paid can be a problem. You have to sometimes charge up front until you get to know them better, and then once you trust that, okay, these guys will pay me when I ask, then you can start shifting around how you're making your money and how you charge customers. So it's hard when it's the only thing you're doing for cash is freelancing, because it's extremely variable. So I'd say that was probably the other big challenge with that.
Do you guys have any thoughts? I mean, as startups who have gotten maybe marketing work done for you?
CEO's helping me with marketing. I just actually went through the Canopy program, so I'm very familiar with being in startup mode. And what happens is people think they want one thing and then change their mind really fast. So it's being very, very clear from the start, like, what are your intentions, what are you trying to get done, and then following through on that deliverable, and then just getting that communication clear from the very start seems to be another challenge. If you're not, you get left with all A, B, C, no one knows what's happening.
And with startups, I mean, as organized as the type A can be, it is an absolute chaos, and so if you like to work in a structured environment, good luck. It's just not going to happen that way. So you have to be flexible in your deliverables. You don't want to be flexible in your expectations, but at the same time, you have to be understanding that they're going through the same things that you are as well.
Yeah, so switching gears a little bit, in this industry, in cannabis, how are we seeing the breakdown with kind of creative work? Or is it being done through agencies? Is it being done through freelancers? Yeah.
So I used to be on the brand side before. I worked at this company called Pen Simple. It was a grinder pen. You put your cannabis in the top, you grind it, you push a button, it shoots your weed out. So I was in charge of sales and marketing because it was a 3-person team. So in terms of making creative, it involved me going on a hike, taking pictures with my iPhone, and it definitely ate into that time and expectation. So self-plug, which is our whole point, is to alleviate that issue of creating that consistent content, because a lot of these people are trying to do it in-house and sacrificing quality and a lot of time because they're not focusing on sales, they're focusing on how do I make that next Instagram post.
What was the question?
Is it agencies,
Oh,
freelancers?
Right.
Where's the trend?
So I see a lot of both. When I first got into the space, or into Denver 2 years ago, there's a flood of agencies and freelancers, designers, like everywhere you went. Any industry event I went to, there would be 3 to 4 booths of, get your design stuff here, get your design stuff here. All the out of all of the ones I've seen, I've only seen a couple where their work was, I guess, more on the mainstream agency level where I was at before. So you kind of see it from both ends. I don't know. Mine's always been freelance, and everybody I've worked with, it's always they hire me as the freelance. I know some that have worked with agencies, specifically a CBD company. I think I was explaining it to you guys about the company I work with now. They spent $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 over 5 years working with various agencies and freelancers, and absolutely no return, nothing, not even a design, nothing. They would just go through the process of, we have to meet, we have to talk, we have to figure out what you're doing, and then every conversation was, well, we're still trying to figure out what you're doing, we need more answers, we need this, and they did that for months, and then at the end they're like, okay, do you have something for me to see? And they say, we don't really have anything, thanks, and they disappear, and the amount of money you paid isn't worth the lawsuit to try and go after them, so you just lost $40,000 or $50,000 and ended up with nothing. Mm-hmm. So they have 5 years of content that have never seen the web yet. So they hired me, and I'm basically in the process of making 5 years worth of content go to the web in some sort of time frame that makes sense. But this happens. There's a lot of people out there that, they follow a lot of the processes that are in this industry of design, and we have to do it this way, and you have to follow these guidelines to get to the final story. And I changed my mentality quickly when I got here. I mean, I changed from that whole philosophy to startup mode. I run my freelance like a startup. I come in, I go, what's the deal? What are we doing? Figuring out kind of what is the path before we go down it, because if you try to turn, it's going to cost you more money and you don't have it. So how do we get to that final piece, but do it fast? You don't have time to wait. As Ryan said as well, the market changes so fast. You need to get out there and get in front of people. So from a freelance agency, I kind of see both, but I'd say the best bet is probably freelance side, from what I can see for a startup.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's agencies out there. There are agencies that were more mainstream and have sort of I used to work for a tech company, and they went through Cone in Denver. Then now Cone has its own Cannabis wing of the company. So I think that's happening, but I agree. Every event I go to, I meet 15 people who. So I think it's probably a little bit maybe flooded. But if you do really good work, then I think there's also room for you to.
The work will be the thing that stands out. The work and your flexibility to work with the client. The relationships I've built, they call me on a regular basis. Anytime they have something that they need done, they usually call me first. And if I'm too busy, most of them will wait, just because it's hard to find somebody out there. Like me.
I use Dustin, and if he's not available, I wait. So let's talk about how much content is actually needed, right? And actually, maybe before we get into that, maybe we should talk a little bit about advertising regulations in the industry and what you can and cannot do, because I think that eventually kind of affects the type of content and how much content is created. So does anyone want to give us a breakdown on marijuana regulations?
Well, there's an overarching thing that I've always been very comfortable with, and that is that 70% of your end user has to be over the age of 21. And so that is the metric that we use with GreenScreens. Luckily, in the store, you are 100% over 21. So there is absolutely zero room for error there. But that's where it starts to get a little bit interesting, because I'm sure you see the Rooster or Westward or newspapers, and truly what that comes down to is they're able to prove that the end demographic in the majority is over 21 by blah blah blah. So that's interesting. The digital side is where it gets really messy, because there's no IDing or really checking there. But also, you cannot show any content that's not compliant. So if someone wants to show a vape pen getting smoked in the park, I can't put that on the screen, because it's breaking the law is what it's doing, and that ends up coming back, to us. So there's been a lot of content money spent in and not able to actually be used because someone forgot that, oh, this is a national park, or I can't smoke a joint on a ski lift and have it in a commercial. So it's one of those very interesting areas right now. But if there's more details, please.
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you look at any alcohol or any alcohol commercials, you'll never see someone actually drinking the alcohol, and it's very, very well done, very subtle, and you would never even notice it as a consumer. But they are being very compliant at that point. And so what we're trying to encourage content creators and people is that if you have an aura or something that you want to present, be as subtle as possible and make sure that you can get that out without actually being uncompliant.
So actually Wana got their account shut down recently, so it's just funny that you brought that up.
For sure.
Yeah, so that is definitely an issue, and what Ryan was talking to, I really wanted to use that fact, so good job. It's proof of demographic is, if you want to look up for a specific term in the regulations, that's what's called. The way you can do that, like on social media, if you have an Instagram account, if you have a business one, you have a way to check that demographic. So you have a good fall safe for that. It's just a good call to action if you want to follow through with that.
You got a question?
Yeah, I wonder if that applies to satire. I wonder if you could, for example, a lot of the commercials that are like on Saturday Night Live, that you're like, I can't believe Wendy's did that.
Right.
But Wendy's had to have okayed it.
Right.
And so I wonder if satire is a way to, I would say circumvent the rules, but be clever about them.
Right. I haven't witnessed any of that, so I can't tell you for sure.
So the advertisements that you have seen, are people like taking things seriously, like in beer commercials?
No.
Where they take,
Right.
like there hasn't been like the Mentos commercial, those
Right.
weird, awkward, sort of absurd commercials.
Right.
I would think if you could get away, I'm asking, could
Yep.
you get away with something like that?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I think it would.
I'm just sorry. Let me
Go
just
ahead.
repeat the question really
Sorry.
quick.
Yeah.
The question is, can you sort of use satire maybe to get around some of the rules?
Yes. Not 100% sure. I think it's one of those things where you'll have a company that'll push the envelope at some point, that'll try it, something close to it. I mean, I've seen some things with McDonald's. I saw a billboard at one point that said something about you can't get something rolled this good outside, something about rolling, and it was a burrito, but it was very heavily pushed towards, we're in the cannabis world right now. So, and it was in Colorado. So they're starting to play with that. I think Tostitos did something related to marijuana and whatnot. So I don't know. I think they're playing with it. I just don't think you can actually have a marijuana plant in your hand, even if you're doing satire and being like, oh yeah, this is something funny, but here's the actual product. I think you can work around it, but I don't know that you could actually show the product in that aspect.
I also
And-
just
Oh, go ahead.
really quick want to mention that McDonald's has a whole lot of money, so
Right.
if they get all their billboards pulled, like, meh.
Right.
I kind of want to bring up like the reverse of that, to be honest, because the stigma really isn't that direction necessarily. The stigma is corporate America afraid to be involved with the cannabis industry. And it's very, banking the whole nine. Something that I see as a huge opportunity as mainstream corporate America playing that satire game in product placement within, someone running down a mountain bike trail, and at the end, in a compliant setting, is putting a topical on their knee or their elbow or something and saying, and now the consumer can say, oh, I mountain bike, and maybe it's a Specialized or a Trek or something like that commercial. Well, that is really cool product placement where it's acting on that consumer's instinct, and you wouldn't even know it as a consumer necessarily. But I think that the real work needs to be done in the opposite direction so that we can start breaking that stigma in general, opposed to us trying to find the loopholes into that, because
Well, as it gets legalized more and more, and as big companies get into that business, that's naturally going to happen.
Correct.
I think it's our job to get ahead of it and be clever with it to see if the big companies maybe throw us some bones.
Right.
To come up with some clever stuff for them.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay, Russell.
So I'm just curious, if you show an ad with a vape pen or a pipe, but you're not showing, the pot, is that kosher? I mean, can you do that?
Depends on what the product is. So if the product is known to be a cannabis product, you're still promoting it outdoors, which in, I think, all states, right, it's illegal to smoke in public. Mm-hmm. It's illegal to consume in public. So as long as at the end of it, if you're not saying, like if it's say B12, okay, fine, it's a vape pen that you smoke B12 out of, it's not related. But if you're doing something and at the end of it it's like 1-to-1 THC CBD, you've just basically put an illegal ad up.
Right, but you were saying earlier that with the alcohol ads, they don't ever show you drinking.
Correct.
So I just didn't know if you showed, the device, whether that would be
Right.
the obvious, icon to, promote the,
Right.
The concept of smoking, but
It
not
isn't illegal to
directly.
have the products on you, right? So if you had a one-hitter or a vape pen, you can have it in your hand, no problem at all. But if you're actually consuming it in a video in a public place, you start to get a little bit...
Right, but that's what I'm saying, you can
But
just
this
show
is,
it.
this is the loophole. Who has the biggest private property in general? Go find that person and shoot all of your film on that.
Right.
And so you have the creek view, and you have the nice little bridge walkway and the beautiful mountain scene, but you're on private property, and that would be an interesting, very compliant way of showing how it's consumed.
Can I ask a question? What happens if you're not compliant?
We, as advocates for the industry, never want to do anything that's not compliant, and so we absolutely are fundamentally, if it's not compliant, it comes down. It's, we do everything that we can to make sure that we're following the rules.
In terms of what actually happens, I'm not 100% sure. Like he said, we don't really push the waters on that, but I know with Wana specifically that you mentioned, that's a client that I've been working with for over 2 years, and we actually had to go to them and say, hey, look, your ads, we can't use them because we don't even know where these are being consumed, because they had them in the shot, and they'd be sitting here, and some of them they did eat, then they stopped eating them, and it was just carrying them, and then it became, hey, look, like, do you really want to go down this route and find out, or do you just want to? And so they've changed a lot of their content to.
I was going to say that I think it makes sense because their newest ad was like a straight up house party.
Correct. Correct.
And it was just a bunch of different people of all races
Yes.
just consuming Wana.
Correct. So that was the most recent ad content they threw out because of that change.
It makes sense.
So, yep.
I forgot what I was going to say.
What were you going to say?
So I want to shift it to CBD, and
Sure.
with the same parallel as in CBD, if you're just promoting CBD tinctures or capsules or edibles.
Right.
Is
I'm
it
not
really-
sure if it's the same legality if you do maybe a THC-free product, then probably you can get away with that. The problem is, it depends on the state now. Are you advertising across all states, or are you just in an illegal state? Because my state, Ohio, CBD is federally illegal right now. They just changed it a few months ago, and it's a Schedule 1 with marijuana, unless it's sold through a licensed dispensary or something. It's insane. So you're completely illegal at that point.
But like targeted Facebook ads within the state of Colorado.
I don't think you can do Facebook at all. It doesn't matter what whether it's CBD or THC.
Yeah, they don't let you.
Yep.
If with any product in the shop, they don't let you run the ad. I've tried multiple different ways.
Right.
If I may.
Yeah, sure.
There's actually a little bit of some stuff. My name's Steve Hoffman. I work more on the hemp and CBD side than
Sure.
the marijuana and THC side. It's all cannabis.
Right.
It's kind of up to FDA, and according to the Farm Bill, hemp is now off of the controlled substances federal schedule list. Hemp is perfectly legal. CBD is perfectly legal. The issue is FDA is still trying to interpret how to kind of let companies market this. So the question is, can you put CBD on the label? And a lot of companies are jumping the gun and doing that, but FDA hasn't really decided yet if we can use CBD or not. And it's also a bit of an issue in food. They haven't decided about food. Now, dietary supplements, that's what you're seeing, all these tinctures. That is under DSHEA, the Dietary Supplements Health and Education Act. So the main thing is marketers don't make health claims.
Correct.
But otherwise, you know, they're, and then the Commissioner of Agriculture for Kentucky, a new guy named Ryan Quarles, he actually wrote a letter to Mark Zuckerberg just 2 weeks ago to say, stop hassling hemp companies. So it's a real, right now, the law is out there, but it's ahead of how people are interpreting it or what they know, so it's still a bit of a wild west out there. But Facebook's starting to get on notice, and when we publish blogs that might mention CBD or hemp, just the growth of the market, we have to appeal to Facebook for them to let us boost those posts just for my agency. So. I also wanted to let people know another way for freelancers, marketers, creatives, the NOCO hempexpo.com, NOCO hempexpo.com is March 29 and 30. I do the publicity for that, so there's communications and publicity. I call that part of the creative services stuff, but it's going to be 10,000 people. It's at the Crown Plaza, DIA. Go there because all the companies will be exhibiting. Go introduce yourselves, find out who the marketing directors are. Network. It's a small community. It reminds me of the natural products industry 35 years ago. And a lot of these companies are turning toward creatives that cut their teeth in the natural products industry.
Right.
Because right now where hemp products and CBD are being sold is in the tobacco shops, but also in natural food stores. But, you know, Neiman Marcus is about to carry some CBD body care. So sophisticated marketing can trail that. Anyway, those are some observations from Compass Natural. Thank you.
Thank you.
But if you think about it, I mean, think about the disconnect right now, right? Colorado, most mature cannabis market, some say in the world, and it is illegal to sell a CBD-only product in a dispensary. Right? So you have to have some THC in there. And I understand why they started that. You can't even buy a pack of gum non-THC or a soda or water in a dispensary. And that is just so interesting to me because, I mean, think of how many CBD companies are out there, right? And I have 100 dispensaries here in Colorado alone. That's 250,000 views a month. And they're saying, I can't sell it there.
To be clear, that's the recreational side, not the medical.
Sure, yes.
Medical, you can buy CBD.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you for the clear. So yes, that is the recreational side. Medical is different, but it's very interesting for us because we end up having to go back and forth in a topic that really shouldn't be going back and forth on, right? And if we go back to the original conversation of being a startup, those sales cycles are too long, right? So what can we do to really make that synergy happen? Because the consumers that are going to the dispensary are consumers that are going to be enjoying CBD for other reasons. My sister suffers from an illness in her inner ear. My brother-in-law loves THC. She cannot deal with it, so he'll be in the dispensary getting THC, and he would love to see, you know, some options maybe for something that didn't have that. So these are these little things that are interesting still, even 5 years later.
Yeah, it is always a little weird when I go to like the Boulder bookstore and they're selling CBD. You're like, ugh, this is strange. I think you had your hand up for a minute.
Somebody
quick, I know we were talking about Facebook ads and what they allow, and I'm kind of surprised because I've seen, I mean, I think you all know Sweetgrass cookies, right? And I constantly see ads from them showing off can of butter, calling it can of butter, showing the butter. I mean, how do they get away with that then if that's not a...
I think the question, just so I can repeat the question is, Sweetgrass is the example you're using, seen lots of ads on Facebook, sort of advertising can of butter.
Products, really.
Yeah.
I can answer that.
Yep.
So basically, they're just dancing on the gray lines of legalities. It's something that these gentlemen definitely said they don't want to be part of, and I respect that. But that's exactly what they're doing. This day and age, you definitely can't, but they're using specific keywords, very careful who they're targeting as content-wise. Yeah, they get away with it. It's definitely not something that, you know, is like they're the only company marketing on Facebook.
Right.
Pawn shop, but it's just one of those things that, like, do you want to jeopardize your business as a whole? Because, you know, God forbid, probably the worst that happens to Sweetgrass, their Facebook gets shut down. So, in, you know, retrospect, it's not that big of a deal, but, you know, it could also infringe on the website, and that website is like digital real estate. You don't want to lose that. So there's a lot of different aspects. I wouldn't push the gray lines, though, for sure.
Yeah, my initial reaction to your question was for now, right? Right. It's a matter of time before that changes. I think what I've heard all three of them say, and something that I think about a lot is, as part of the growth of a brand new industry, it's our responsibility to build it in a way that is thoughtful and respectful. And so I think there are definitely people within the industry, and you have to remember the industry comes from a screw the man kind of side of things, right? So you kind of, take that, right? But there is a side of the industry that pushes the lines and sort of tries to find the loopholes, and that is one way of doing business. But we're fighting a battle of people understanding that this can be a normalized option, a medical option, another safe vice for people to indulge in so that they can be healthy people. And so we need to be respectful of that and sort of think about how do we not give cannabis a bad name. So, yeah.
And I just want to throw a devil's advocate, like, high-level thought out there, right? But, I mean, there's a lot of energy going into growing cannabis in Colorado, right? And these cannabis companies pay their energy bill every month, guaranteed they do. Where does the energy company bank, right? And so at the end of the day, there is a very large, interesting disconnect around some of the stuff that we fight in this industry.
Yeah. I think compliance is a thing I think about a lot, that we talk about a lot. Someone's knocking at the door. Yeah, so I think it's important that we stay compliant. We don't try to skirt the rules and that kind of thing. Any other questions on that? I think, yeah, definitely. The question was, where does the regulations come from and who enforces them, basically? And our response was individual companies, Facebook, those kind of people make those decisions, and that is true. But there are also some regulations as well within each state on sort of what is allowed and what is not allowed, especially when it comes to the advertising specifically of like cannabis brands.
So,
yeah.
People are making claims. Yeah.
Right.
It cures something or.
Right.
Yeah, and that, I mean.
Or just billboards. In
yeah, right.
California, that was a big one.
Yeah. My understanding, I think, is that you can advertise for dispensaries, but not for products. Is that correct? Yeah? Okay. That's correct. Okay, so I think let's switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of what to expect when working with a cannabis company. Is it different? I mean,
go for it. I think it ties in with the startups, as we talked about, that every cannabis company is still going through that startup phase. So it's being clear, understanding that they don't have the funds necessarily just because they're raking a lot of money through the dispensary. They also don't have the same type of tax deductions that a normal business does. So being cognizant of their upbringing and knowing that, I think, is probably the biggest difference between working with non-cannabis versus cannabis.
Yeah, the only thing, again, just to reiterate, is that every company is different. So yeah, setting up a plan and going into every company with the same plan, I haven't seen it work yet. I mean, I get close, but there's always nuances, and you have to be able to shift and adjust and kind of meet the needs on an independent, individual basis.
Yeah, and something Paul just mentioned a second ago was tax issues, and I think there are a couple of key things to know about the industry, and it sounds like most of you are familiar with the industry, so I apologize if I'm telling you things you already know. But I think there are, there's a huge tax issue, right? So any business that traffics in a federally scheduled narcotic has to pay taxes on their gross revenue, right? Something like that?
Mm-hmm, correct.
Which means they don't get to deduct operating expenses. So they pay a lot more in taxes. And then there's banking issues. So it just sort of complicates everything. Questions? Yeah. So sort of the question was, what about tools and services around the industry? So that would be the ancillary side of things. I mean, you guys are all ancillary companies. You want to answer that question?
Yeah. Is there like a specific ancillary side that you're looking more info?
Especially with software, let's say back-end software for business to business or tracking.
So yeah, what? Yeah, so point of sale systems, I would say is probably one of the most popular software categories. You can go to MJ BizCon and see about 20 plus of them. So yeah, FlowHub is a market leader on that. But there are other services for banking, for example, they act as a fintech solution, like a military. I can't say the right word. They're the in-between person between the banks and the dispensaries, so they have that protection as well. I do content creation, they do advertising, so there's definitely a suite of services within the industry, and they don't have the same banking issues that regulated businesses do.
Right, or the tax issues. I mean, we're taxed just like a regular, we're an LLC, so we're just taxed like a regular LLC company at this point, that we're not looked at any different.
So I think the distinction is probably also around having a license. So if you are licensed by the state of Colorado for a marijuana-related business, so retail, manufacture, distribution, testing, cultivation, research, then you're probably going to face those tax issues and the banking issues. And I mean, I know that there are ancillary companies that run into banking issues, especially when it comes to taking money.
Yep.
So like Shopify or anything like that gets complicated. Yeah.
I happen to bring somebody with me who's an expert in taxes in Canada.
You do not touch the product. You are not subject to 280E. So anything that touches the product is subject to the 280E compliance.
Right. Physical product not meaning an ad that has the product in it, correct?
Right. It has to actually physically touch the product to
Yep.
be subject to 280E.
Got it.
So our 280E expert here just told us that you have to touch the plant to be.
And so, but one of the issues that a lot of auxiliaries have is if you name your company something that has cannabis in it, you're gonna get your bank shut down.
Right.
They don't know that you don't touch the product, and so you have to be really, really careful of what you name your company, because if you, I have a friend that has one that's cannabis accounting. She's had her banking, her bank shut down at least 10 times.
Jeez. Yep.
Yeah,
Yikes.
and so you just have to be really cautious with what you name your company.
Right. Yep.
Does that go for hemp as well?
Yes.
It can be, it's not supposed to
Yes.
because of the new farm regulations, but some things just haven't gotten on board with that yet.
Yeah, and I think with the Farm Bill in particular, it's going to take a minute. This is pretty new, so.
Specifically with the CBD space, when we started the CBD retail distribution that we have, it took 6 months to get a gateway to just be able to accept payments in general. And then once the Farm Bill hit, I literally got a phone call it was probably less than a month ago, that U.S. Bank was starting to accept gateways for CBD. So you could literally go straight through a major bank chain and get your banking done through them at that point. I wouldn't recommend it right off the rip because they all jumped on it real fast, and who knows how long that's going to stay there until they decide that, oh wait, never mind, Farm Bill, pull it, let's do something else, and you lose it. But they did open that up for all CBD, only CBD, no vapes, no THC, nothing else can be in it. It has to be straight CBD.
Was there a question?
Another interesting challenge is because we can't accept credit, we're cash only, and then Bitcoin has now entered the realm of weird possibilities. How do you guys are responding to that?
The joke around the office about Bitcoin, about cryptocurrency and cannabis is 1 + 1 = -3. I think it's too much. It's too much for people to wrap their minds around at once. I mean, two very new industries that have a lot of risk, and people have tried it, but it does just, it's not there yet. I don't think it's there yet.
I think a quick thing too is I think the transaction cost normally for that, it outweighs the cost of just doing a debit. And a lot of these bigger dispensary chains have an option where you can just do a debit transaction as your card. So it's like $3 using the thing I normally use, or this weird new thing that costs even more money. Mm-hmm. So it's more just that issue than anything else.
Yeah. Okay, so I think let's maybe wrap it up with, yeah, we're getting close. Wrap it up. Last question. What are maybe some trends that we've maybe seen in the industry besides the use of the color green, which I swear to God, if one more cannabis company comes in green, I'm looking at you, Ryan.
Sorry.
Yeah, trends.
You're gonna see, so this happened in the e-juice, e-liquid, the vape juice that's non-THC, not, it's been around a little bit, especially in the mainstream side. They've had a huge shift in that market. I have a client that's in that space, so that's the reason I know what they're doing, but they've shifted from the tie-dye, cartoon, graffiti look to more established, minimal, clean, corporate-y looking designs. I'm seeing that everywhere. Like every company is shifting to something that's taken a little more serious. And I know in the e-juice there was a big issue because a lot of it is cotton candy and blah, and it's very kid-friendly, and then you've got these kid graphics on it, so the FDA basically came down and said, look, you can't do this at all. So you're going to start seeing that, I think, in this space a lot more. You're going to see a lot of shift in that hippie, we'll call it hippie designs, to more of this corporate, clean, and again, a lot less pot leaf, a lot less green. I know a lot of the clients, when I meet with them, their first thing is, I don't want any green in it, and I don't want to see the leaf anywhere. So that's the trend I'm seeing, is kind of moving that direction.
I'm seeing a trend in that brands themselves are jumping the gun ahead of themselves a little bit in going to an agency right off the bat and actually not even knowing what their brand identity necessarily is, and launching with all of these things and having these high expectations, and it's not quite there yet. Yes, the industry's moving fast as a whole, but there's a wave that comes that is the consumer wave, right? And so everyone's trying to theorize what's going to be the next biggest hit. Is edibles? Is it gummies? Is it vapes? Is that the whole thing? And there's a lot of data coming out about that. And I think that there's a big shift in from what I've seen, in just getting awareness out from brands into, I need to see ROI on my marketing dollars at this point. And if you're just a marketing firm that's going to get impressions and get great content, and it's great, that doesn't matter. In the mainstream, they have abilities to optimize this digital experience all the way to the sale. They know that person bought this on this day. And if you don't have those or that ammunition in your gun, I think you're going to be having a hard time keeping up with what the expectations are with that wave.
So my trend revolves around the influencer marketing. As I've been more intertwined with that, it's not as focused around these big celebrities talking about a cool new product. It's the people who have small followings that actually listen and care for what they say. So it's this focus away from big celebrities to more user-generated, authentic testimonials is a trend I'm seeing. And I'm not sure if I get a plug, but for people I'm looking for I'm looking for developers and photographers. So I'd encourage you to talk to me afterwards.
Cool. Any final questions that we didn't talk about? No. God, we answered everybody's questions, huh? Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for listening to us talk.
Thank you, everybody.
This video was produced by Boulder Digital Arts. BDA offers affordable, cutting-edge classes and workshops for designers, entrepreneurs, and tech professionals. All of their programs are taught by industry experts. And as a small local business, they're proud to have supported Boulder's creative and technology community for well over a decade. BDA's classes cover a wide range of subjects, from digital marketing and video production to web development and graphic design. Learn more at boulderdigitalarts.com.